Another thing you can do with lists is that you can remove items from it. So you can basically delete items by content or by index. So if I know the index of an item in the list, I can delete it. Now there are two ways to do this deletion to remove that element. One way is using the delete function where you say del space and then you say the list name and then the index. And what this is going to do, it's going to go to the list and it's going to remove the item. Now, another way to do it is by calling the list.pop method. And what this is going to do, it's going to remove it, but it's also going to return it back to you. So in case you want to maybe print it out or, print out what you're deleting, you can use this method. So let's see examples of both of them. So let's comment out some code that we wrote before. So here I have some methods. Some lists that I have. I can go to a list and say, for example, delete my list of 0. Okay, and then when I try printing my list, I will see that apples should be deleted. Okay, so now it only has 123. Now let's say I wanted to delete all the items in the list for some reason, but I want to see what I'm deleting. So instead of using the delete, what I can do is I can use the pop. So here, if I would have just said my list.pop 0, this will produce the same result. Both of them, oops, sorry, the method. So both of these lines produce the same thing. So both delete and pop do the same thing. Now, what you can do, for example, here, when I want to print it, so I can, when I'm popping, it actually returns what it's printing, what it's deleting. So I can say print deleting, and here it'll show me what it's deleting. And so I'm saying that I'm going to be deleting element 0. It's going to show it to me before it deletes. So it shows me that it's deleting apples. And then when I delete it, I see that the list. So this is the only difference between the delete and the pop, is that the way you call it, of course, is different, but basically delete will do the deletion and pop will delete, but it also gives it back to you. Now, let's say I want to delete the whole content. Okay, so I want to delete everything. So let's here, I want to go and delete every element in the list. Well, what you can do is you can do a for loop, for example. I can do for index in range. So I'm going to go through all the elements in the list. And let's do my list 2 because it's a little bigger. So I'm going to say, give me the length of my list 2. So I know how many indices there are. And then I can say print, for example, deleting, and put what I'm deleting. So I'm going to say my list 2.pop, and I'm going to pop index that I'm going through. So here, this for loop is going to give me the indices from 0 up to the length of the list, not including the length. And then I'm going to call pop with that index. And now when I try to print my list 2 at the end, I'm going to find that it's empty. So here, oops, what's wrong? Invalid syntax. Okay, so here, there's nothing invalid. Okay, this line, I'm missing a parenthesis. Let's try running it again. And I got pop index out of range. Now, this happens because as I am popping from the list is getting shorter. So if I try doing something like this, it doesn't work because here the range is giving me, so range is giving me numbers from 0 up to, if this item has 1, 2, 3, 4, has 4 items in it, it's giving me from 0 to 3. Now here, if I call 0, it's going to delete 0. But when I call 1, and then as you delete from the list, basically. So at the end, for example, the last time I'm after like popping some stuff from the list, my list now has like 1 element, right? So it only has banana. And if I try to delete banana, I can't use index 3 because the list only has 1 index. So doing it that way is not going to work. So what the list provides is another method that is called pop. And what pop does, it's going to, you can call it without any index. And what it does, it removes and returns the last element. So it's going to give you the list kind of backwards, but it will delete one thing at a time. So this is not going to work. So I'm going to put here a comment that it's not going to work. So let's put a comment here. This line will not work because the list is changing size. And I'm relying here on the size of my initial list. So this is not going to work. So instead, what I can do is I can say for index in range length my list of 2. One actually is just to put the whole thing that doesn't work. So this is not going to work. So I'm going to take this line out. This is the code that's not going to work. Let's put the comment up here for you guys to see it later. So this is not going to work. But what will work is for me to use the pop. So I'm going to say here print deleting. And I'm going to just go to my list 2 and say pop. So I'm going to pop without an index. So why am I using this index here? Just as a counter so that I know how many times I should be deleting from my list. Let's see if that works. And I have a syntax error. Where is the syntax error? 1, 2, 3. One more. Okay, let's try again. My list 2. Okay. Let's try one more time. I had an extra parenthesis in there. And so here it's showing me that it's deleting. And notice that it's deleting backwards because the pop returns the last element in the list. So this is used to delete all contents, but backwards. Okay. So depending, basically what I'm trying to show you here is that there are a lot of methods that are provided, like the delete or the popping by an index or popping backwards. You'll have to look at the application that you're doing and the program that you're trying to write and figure out which method is the best way of doing and achieving what you want to achieve. So I'm just trying to show you a lot of functionality that is provided with lists. I don't expect you to memorize everything, but like I mentioned before with strings, if there is something that I asked you to do with the classwork, I expect you to do that. Another thing I want to show you is that at the end of every chapter, there is like summary pages. And what I would highly suggest is printing those summary pages and keeping them with you so that, let's say you have an exam or something, you can refer back to them and kind of get a glimpse of all the methods and functions that are available on lists. Okay, so we saw popping and deleting by index. The next thing is if you have an item and you know the item name, you can call remove on it. So what it does, it removes the first occurrence of it. So let's say here I have my list has happy, grumpy, zebra, and let's put a couple more happies in there. So I have happy again, and let's put another happy here. And I want to delete happy from this list. Okay, so let's comment this code out so it doesn't run. I want to do is I want to delete happy. I want to delete happy from my list 2. So if I just go to my list 2 and say remove happy, now I'm going to print it, print my list 2 to see what the contents are. I find that it removed the first happy, but it didn't remove the others. Okay, now the other thing I want to show you is that what remove does, it returns let's try here printing what it's removing. So actually it returns nothing. Sorry, I got mixed up between Python and and Java. So the way you know that it doesn't have something in it is that it throws an exception. So let's just say remove O. And so here you see that when I try to remove something that doesn't exist, it throws an exception. So now I know that if I try to remove something and it doesn't exist, I'll throw an exception. So what if, so this will throw an exception. So let's put a comment that this line will throw an exception, value error, because it does not exist in list. Now, the question is, what if I want to delete all of the happies that are in here? Do I know how many happies there are? I don't. So I can have like maybe a while loop or a for loop that runs until an exception happens. So for example, I can say while true. So remember when we had those exceptions that would kind of, those loops that would run forever, I can say while true, remove happy. Now, what I'm going to do is I know that eventually this line of code will throw an exception. So I want to try doing this line because I know it's going to throw an exception. So I'm going to try doing it. If it succeeds, great. Now, what if it fails? Okay, so I get a value error. That means if I get a value error, so let's put a comment here. If I get a value error exception, it means no more happy to remove. I've removed them all. Okay, so what should I do in that case? If I want to exit this loop, what keyword did we learn to just exit a loop? We learned the word break. Very good. So here I'm going to just say, as long as I'm deleting, I'm able to delete, keep going, keep going. So while true, just keep removing. And once I finish removing all of them, I should just break. When I get a value error, I should break. And so let's run this code and see if we're going to get my list with only 1, 2, 3. So I should only see grumpy, zebra, and banana when I try to list it, print it. So let's see if it works. And it worked. So, you know, I can't show you everything in the world that you can do, but we try to put logic that we learned from one chapter with logic that we learned in this chapter to accomplish tasks. And this is really what programming is about. Me giving you, letting you know that all these exist, and then you trying to figure out whatever application you run into that you need to do in your life, figuring out how can I put all these concepts together to achieve a task. Okay, so this was the remove. Other functions that you can use with lists are min, max, len, and sum, and they're really nice. So these work with more with numbers. So here, let's do some. We saw the len already. Let's just cut that out. So we saw if I try to print the length of my list 2, it's going to tell me how many elements are in my list 2. So it tells me that my list 2 has 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you want to get the minimum, the smallest element in my list 2, it'll tell you the smallest word. So banana would be the first word that appears in the dictionary. It would happen, it would show up here. Let's try max of num list. I want the maximum number in the num list. It's going to tell me that it's 99. And with num list, what I can also do is print the sum. So I can say, add me all the numbers in num list. And it's going to add them all up and tell me what the sum is. Now, I can't do that with a list that has like strings. So if I try saying sum of my list 2, which is all strings, I can't add strings, so it's not going to let you do that. So this exists, the sum exists only for number lists. So this is only for number lists. But len, max, and min will work for any list. Max, and min, if it's strings, it'll do alphabetically. And now remember also that if you try to do min and max on a mixed list, that's not going to work because you can't compare numbers and strings. What else you can do with lists? You can split a string into a list. So let's look here at this string 1, 2, 3, 4 that's separated with spaces. And what I want to do is I want to kind of split them up so that I know all the parts of this sentence. So here, if I go to string 1 and I say split, what it's going to do, it's going to go and split this string on white spaces. So when you give it nothing, the split method, you don't give it anything, what it does, it splits on the white space. So it's going to give you back a word list. And if you print the word list, you're going to find that it has the individual parts 1, 2, 3, 4. Word list string 2 is separated by a comma and a space. So if I go to string 2 and say split and I just put a comma in there, I'm going to get here 1, 2, 3, and 4. But if you notice here between the quote and the T, there's a space. Between the quote and the T, there's a space. Between the quote and the F, there's a space. Why? Because I split on the comma. And so it came and broke things up right after the comma. And so here the word is space 2 and space 3. But if I really want to split these without anything, I can split on the comma with a space, or I could split on the comma and then do a trim, not a trim, sorry, and a strip, so that I strip the spaces from all around. So why is this useful? This is useful when you have a string, like a user is entering a string. Let's say the user is entering like their name. So let's say user input, and you ask them for their name and they enter, let's just say Mickey Mouse, okay, Junior. Like that. And now I want to know the different parts of this string, right? So what I can do is I can come and say, I'm going to split it, because here, if I try getting like, and I can try getting like where the spaces are and all that, but it's a little complicated. But what I can do is do the split, say user input dot split. I want you to split yourself. And here, because I don't put anything inside the parentheses, it's going to split on the spaces. And then what I do, if I print here, split string, I'm going to see the different parts. I'm going to see that it has 3 sections. Is not defined. Oh, string. Let's try one more time. And so it gives me the separate parts. So what I can do is I can, maybe print them on different lines, or for example, I can say for I in split string, print I. So I want to print each one on a separate line, for example. Okay, I can also see if, for example, I'm expecting that they're giving me first name and last name and middle name. I can do a check. If split string, the length of it, the number of elements in it, for example, does not equal 3, I'll print an error. Must enter first, middle, and last names. So if they give me names only also. Okay, so if they give me more, it'll issue an error. If they give me less, it'll issue an error. But you can do this basically so that you can use the split method so that you can manipulate input and figure out like if all the data is there or not there or missing. The nice thing also is that just like we were able to convert numbers to strings and strings to numbers, we can convert a string into a list. How would I do that? Well, if I have a string, let's say here, Mickey Mouse Junior, and I want to split it, change it into a list, so I can say, let's say user input list equal, and I call the list function on user input. And now if I print user input list, I will get the individual characters in the string. And so it split it so that every single character is in a list. That might be useful if you want to go and maybe search for a certain number, a certain character, and maybe change it. So remember, strings are immutable. If I want to change this so that maybe the M and the J are lowercase, I can't do it with a string. But with a list, I can, because I can go to the list and say, if a letter is uppercase, change it to lowercase. So strings, remember, are immutable, but lists are not. And so that might be a reason why I change something from being a string into a list, so I can go and manipulate every single character and change it as I need to. Just like with strings, we were able to use the in operator to figure out if a character was in a string. I can also do that with the list. So I can go and see if an item is in the list. So here, if I want to know, for example, if 65 is in numList, so I can say if 65 in numList, for example, print found 65, else print not found. So here, if I give it 60, if I ask for 65 in numList, it'll say it's not found. But if I search for 99, for example, then it'll say that it is found. So you can use the in and not in, just like what we were able to do with strings. This is just an example. I can here split a string into a list. We saw that already before. And now for the classwork, what I want you to do to practice all these functions and methods that we've learned to use with lists is I want you to ask the user for 5 numbers. So you're going to write like a for loop or a while loop that asks for 5 numbers. And I want you to take these numbers and put them into a list. So as you're reading the numbers, I want you to put them in a list. And then after you're done, I want you to sort the list and use the min and max and sum and len functions to print me the minimum, the maximum, and the average. Average, you'll use the sum and len because average is sum divided by len. And you're going to print them out to the screen. Now, I just want to make a comment about functions and methods. Anytime I call something like this is called a function. But when I have a dot after an object, like here I have a string and I say dot something, this is a method. So len is a function because I'm calling len and I'm giving it a parameter as an argument. I'm giving it some argument, the list as an argument, so that the len tells me the length of this list. But when you say dot, like dot split, dot remove, dot append, these are all methods. So I know sometimes I make a mistake and I say function instead of a method or a method instead of a function, but by definition, a function is one that's kind of standalone. You call it, and in parentheses, you give it the input you want it to take. The method is the one where you have some object and you say dot, and then you call the method on. So if the name of the thing that you're calling comes after a dot, that means it's a method. But if you start off with the name of your function, this is a function. So list is a function, print is a function, len is a function, but dot split is a method, dot remove is a method, dot pop is a method. So this is the difference between methods and functions.